All right. Well, good morning, everyone. Welcome to Board Talk. A lot of gratitude for y'all being here. A smaller group today, which I like, and some old friends. So I really appreciate y'all taking an hour out of your day for this important conversation. I'm really excited to have Stacey Aviva Flint here, thus calling in from Colorado. So thank you, Stacey Aviva, again. Um, why don't we just for a sec share in the chat who's here or who you are, and just put, if you can, all model, put your name, put your organization, and where you're calling in from, just so we can see who's here. Because I think we got a lot of big California contingency, which is great. We got Chicago, New York, Berkeley, Oakland, yeah, Hillsborough, Long Beach. I like this very local group. Um, so as we've been doing, I just want to take a moment of silence and a pause just for all the violence and the lost lives in Israel and Gaza right now and around the world. All right. It's a heavy time. So it's great to be with you. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. For those who are new, I'm Seth Linden. I'm the founder and principal of Gather Consulting. My board governance work is peaked by being on the boards of Jewish Studio Project and Jewish Long Beach. And I've been doing governance and board work for the last 5 years as a consultant and for probably a couple decades as a executive director and a program officer at the Jim Joseph Foundation. So for those who are new, Board Talk is a space to share ideas and resources around nonprofit governance and to connect and learn from other board members. And we've been doing this since COVID, and we're relaunching now. And as I always say, boards, I believe, have a responsibility to step up now and always. Boards are a community, they're a cohort. I've heard they're a staple of democracy, and I believe we need good governance now more than ever. In these crises, there's danger and opportunity. And so we really want to talk about the opportunity here. How might we discover and engage in education and advocacy for effective governance, good decision making, strong leadership models, policies, and values, especially during these crises? So, as we always do, I want to break us out just for like 5 minutes into pairs, just so we can connect with one another. There's no agenda except to ask. I will put two questions in the chat if you're looking for a specific, but it's really, how are you doing as a human and how are you doing as a nonprofit leader? So I'm going to break us out, let's see, into one sec. I think this is going to be 5 breakout rooms. Let's do that. All right, I'm going to break you out for 5 minutes. Say hi, introduce yourselves, and we'll come on back and begin. Resume recording. All right. So hope you all enjoyed that. Yep. Thank you, Vicky. Please feel free to share some gratitude in the chat to your pair, your chavruta. So now we get to talk with our special guest, Stacey Aviva. And again, so excited to have Stacey Aviva here with us. I met Stacey Aviva fairly recently, a few years ago. I was thinking it was at a JPRO conference, potentially in Cleveland. Might have been the first time we met, and we've been connecting ever since around her work at the Federation System and our work here in Long Beach. So just a couple quick notes of intro and kudos to Stacey Aviva. I know her to be an incredibly smart, visionary leader, incredible experience. She was just reminding me, and expertise working on boards and for boards through COVID as a Jewish educator, as an executive director, an urban planner, and a philanthropist. She's calling from Boulder, Colorado. And again, was just reminding me she gets to work with and for an advisory board at JEDI, Justice, Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion, through JFNA, and she'll talk more about that, through the Jewish Family Service, nonprofit in Colorado, the Rose Community Foundation, working for and on the Jewish Life Committee, the Hadassah Foundation, and the Kamoka organization. She's a part of the Mandel Executive Leadership Cohort and TU, which is a culturally responsive evaluation cohort for Jews of color. There's, I'm sure, lots more that I could say, but I just want to welcome you, Stacey Aviva, and maybe just start by sharing a little bit about your work at JFNA and what it's been like over the past few months, for you and for JEDI, and just your work in general.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with everyone here today. These are interesting times in our world. And at the Jewish Federations of North America, which I'm privileged to work, we had an initiative called Jewish Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion that was created in 2020 to really harness the power of the diversity in the Jewish community. People don't often realize that our Jewish community is a multinational, multi-ethnic, multilingual, multiracial community. And there are opportunities and challenges within that. And so we really started this initiative so that we could create a culture of belonging within our community so that we could be nurturing the leaders of today and tomorrow, and harness that power of diversity. What it's been like in the last few months, particularly, is there has been a balancing and sometimes imbalancing of feeling incredible despair and fear and loneliness, coupled with feeling optimism, resilience, and determination that we're not going to let the moment define us, but we are going to define the moment, and define the moment by being deeply Jewish and committed to our Jewish values, being deeply committed to racial equity and reconciliation and relationships, and being human. And so from day to day, it's okay to go from I'm completely devastated and don't know what to do, to in the next moment being I'm ready to take on the world. It is the both and being able to hold those vastly different emotions is what's needed at this time. Our colleagues need to be able to express that, our leaders. And that's what it means to be human. That's what it means to be Jewish. And that's what it means to be in this shared society, that we can hold both of those, and we need to hold both of us, as you so eloquently brought us into this space doing that.
Thank you. Can you talk about how your board, or the advisory board at JEDI, as one example, or any of the boards that you sit on, how they showed up for you, for their team over the last few months? What have they done that was particularly helpful for you?
I love that question. I think that in times of crisis, it really reveals the foundation that you're built on. Because when crisis hits, you go into autopilot mode. You go into that guiding system that just kicks in on autopilot, what your North Star is. What's been so helpful is really knowing what our why is
Mm,
and communicating what our why is and making sure that in this moment and in that context, is that still our why? Are we committed to that? And then making sure that in our operations, our decisions, our policies and procedures are all coming out of that why.
mm,
So we're not creating something new. We're not chasing after the latest trend. We're not being in complete reactive mode. Of course, there's going to be that, but is it really guided by our why? And one of the important conversations that was had was by one of our committees was how do we communicate in this moment when we're being bombarded with all of the culture wars around, well, what do we say about diversity, equity, and inclusion, and what do we how do we respond to October 7th? We had a conversation, and in that conversation, we really decided, okay, really just thought back, who are we? And it was like, we're Jewish. Okay, what are our Jewish values that guide us? And it really calmed us and it really kept us from being reactive because we had a base to go back to and go, we know who we are. We know what our values are, and the words might change. Someone might decide, okay, this is the word we're going to use today, or this is the word we're going to do tomorrow. But no matter the word, what are the values? What are those shared values? And then really being confident to say what those values are, those Jewish values are. So again, we're not trying to come up with a new fancy slogan or whatever. We're just going into what what those things are. And I'll just end with something that I read in Forbes magazine a couple months ago. It was in November. I was talking about the crisis of meaning, and that because of a decline of traditional institutions and the rise of individualism and consumerism, there's an increasing pace of technology and change, and then awareness of the global problems, that the crisis of meaning is what we really need to address.
mm.
And that is making sure that we, again, know our whys, revisit our values, making sure they're still relevant, and then act and make choices based on those. And pretty much, you're never going to be perfect, but you're never going to be able to go get the boat, going in uncharted waters or off into a huge storm if you um, if you know who you are, your values. So I really appreciate having those conversations continually over the last couple months.
Beautiful. Thanks, Stacey. When you talk about the values, have you and your boards had to reassess your values since October 7th, or is it doubling down on them, or is it having a more explicit conversations about values of an organization, and how do boards play a part in setting those values or
Mm,
aligning on those?
thank you. I think that in our world right now, we're so soundbite driven, um, that it's easy to want to feel like, oh, let me figure out how I can condense everything into a soundbite and make it really catchy, and to go after um, people's brains with facts and figures. Right
Mhm.
now, so many people are in fight or flight mode that they're not responding rationally. And oftentimes, as in the Jewish community, we're really great at this. And we're going to give you those facts. We're going to give you those figures. We're going to take you in 1948, or we're going to take you back to those things, and that's great. But what people need, we realize, is what we people need the heart, and that's why values go straight to those hearts. Well, what are the stories? What are the narratives? What do we want people what do we want to feel? What do we want people to feel when they hear what we're saying? Because people aren't going to remember those facts and figures, but they're going to remember those feelings. And
Mm.
if you're able to share stories that bring people to the point of, wow, I know what it feels. I remember what it feels like to be excluded, no matter what your identity is. I remember you tell that story, it makes me remember that doesn't feel good. Maybe that's not a good idea. Or I remember what it feels like when someone includes me, when someone realizes that I too, as a woman or as a caregiver or as a person who um, who's in a different socioeconomic or age bracket or who's an immigrant, I know what it feels like to be included. That feels good. That story resonates with me. Then when you tell people about your values, they're connecting with you on a visceral heart level because you've told a story that connects to a human shared value.
Mm,
And so we had to remember to yes, the facts and figures are important, but what are we really trying to communicate at the heart level? And
mhm,
those are really important discussions that we had that really kind of brought us back from kind of freer and freaking out.
mhm. We could all use some calming down, and some values alignment, it sounds like. I want to ask, the last few conversations we've talked about the difference and the challenges between aligning your board on certain decisions versus informing your board about certain things you're going to do.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about how, again, when it sounds like, I would imagine around values, you want alignment with your
Mm-hmm.
board. Are there ever times, and what are those times where you might not need alignment? You just need to inform your board that the organization is going in this direction, or that we're going to put out a statement or whatever it is. But maybe
Mm-hmm.
talk a little bit about the difference between informing and aligning with your board.
Great. This is a great question. And I found it really challenging as I started to think about it. And it really just fed back in. That informing of our boards is really born out of number one, which is that crisis of meaning and making sure that we have um, those values and we know that what we stand for. Because when we have that, we should just be informing on how our operations, our policies, and our procedures are in alignment and operationalizing those values and those meanings that we've already become aligned on. If you're starting to having the conversation of are we aligned, you gotta stop. There can be no informing then because you need to start, hopefully not start back over all over. You need to go revisit. But that informing should really be as a result of all that pre-work so that when you're doing the work, people and they're hearing they're being informed on, they can quickly go and tying it in. I'm informing you that we are um, making this statement, or we are operationalizing this policy, or we're setting up our governance policies and procedures and strengthening them because we said that we were really committed to this value. So one of the boards that I'm on, Jewish Family Services of Colorado, realized that during COVID and going into um yeah, it was really COVID and then going into this current crisis, that they were losing a lot of mental health staff to other nonprofits. And we realized that it was because they were being paid better. And we had to do an equity study. And we realized that our pay equity was off. And so we were losing people because we were saying that we are committed to equity. We're committed to all of these values, but in our policies and in payments, we were not demonstrating that we really held that value. And so when we did that equity study and we put it in our budget and we retroactively gave out those equity adjustments, our our mental health professionals and our ability to operate and to meet the demands of the grants that we were that are tied to those people, we were able to hold on and maintain staff at a much better rate, because we made sure that our policies and procedures were in alignment with what we said with that
Mhm.
by doing that equity study.
That's great. Yeah, I when I was running a nonprofit years ago, a coach of mine always said you could look at your budget and you'll see your values. And so to make sure that if you're gonna, whatever you're saying you want to do, make sure that there's a line item and a dollar amount for that. I just want to ask one more question, then we'll open it up to folks here. I love that example at JFNS or JFS. Uh, Share another example if you can from one of your current boards, around, again, it could be around something that's really worked, recently to support the board, or if you feel comfortable sharing like a miss, and you can keep the board anonymous. But share something. I think folks here on the call we always love to hear like a specific process, vote, activity, or practice, right, that folks can take home. What's again kind of really working, or what's been really hard in the
Mm.
past little bit?
I was doing a short-term advisory uh, committee assignment with a group that was doing some leadership development training with um, a um, equity, diversity, and inclusion lens within um, the Jewish community, and it was a based model, and they put different regions together, and it was interesting. We just got back the evaluations and the feedback from the groups. And we found that one region of professionals and supervisors really found um, the, uh, the sessions and um, the um, the advising and the resources really helpful, and the peer interactions really helpful. But we found a group from another region that didn't find it helpful at all. And what we realized is that had we gotten more context, um, and like kind of like done a pre-survey, some pre-work, understanding the context of these leaders, perhaps those two regions might not have been paired together,
Hmm.
because the learning was really impacted, because their contexts were just so different, and they saw one another just so differently. It was like, you're not really helpful. And so, when we brought the advisors back together, we said to this group that we were advising, get us involved in the kind of the pre-work, the pre-survey, the pre-evaluation, so that we really can understand the context before we go and create this programming. And so that's something that now they're going back into to redesign um, 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 this process in the second iteration.
Great, thank you. I'm going to remove the pin so now we can all see one another, and really just open it up to the folks here. I have some more questions, but I hope and I assume folks here on the call have some questions. So feel free to take yourself off mute or drop a question into the chat, or raise your hand, however you want to do it.
I'll ask a question.
Jeff, and maybe just, yeah, introduce yourself, where you're calling in from, who you are.
Sure. My name is Jeff Teal. I am calling in from north of Chicago. I work at a foundation called the Irving Harris Foundation, doing grant making in the Jewish uh, philanthropic space. And I also have a background in urban planning. And I'm curious, like, how, in your experience, I mean, maybe it hasn't, but if your urban planning background has like impacted the work that you do now or influenced the work that you do now, and like how has that how has your urban planning background supported the work that you do now? Just curious to hear about that.
Jeffrey, can I just ask you a quick clarifying piece? When you say how has it affected your work in the Jewish community, or how has it affected just generally work that Stacey's doing anywhere?
And it's Stacey Aviva, please.
Stacey Aviva.
Oh, Jeffrey, you're on mute. Did you want to add, you were adding to your question?
Yeah, sorry. So yeah, I mean, I think it could be really any facet of that. But I mean, I'm particularly interested in your work like that you're doing presently in the Jewish community,
Right.
in your role at JFNA. Yeah.
So the great question, and thank you for the clarifying question. I think what's really helped me from my urban planning background is and I've worked in Chicago for over 20 years and got my master's from CUPA at the UIC College of Urban Planning and Public Administration. Is asset-based community development, the principles of asset-based community development and asset mapping. A lot of traditional legacy-based Jewish institutions are great at problem solving. You want to go in and you want to see that problem, you want to see the SWOT analysis and really hone in on the problems. Whereas asset-based community development and asset mapping is really starting from a strengths-based approach. First of all, that helps people to tap into their frontal lobe. You know, they're not in that fight or flight because when you tell someone something's wrong or you just focus on the problems, people get really nervous and upset. And I think that when you what we've learned from that work, which really comes out of McKnight and Jody Kratzman in Chicago, is that when you start to look at what are the strengths in the community, what do we do well, what are our assets, and start to map that out, you get people in the framework of they're ready to even digest the problems because they're looking at, we can handle this. We've got the muscle, we've got the resilience. So it didn't scare the Jewish community when we started talking about Jewish equity, diversity, and inclusion, because we started to look at what are our strengths. We are a multinational, multi-ethnic, racially diverse people. That is a strength. Okay, so we can look at our challenges with that and deal with that because we realize that we have this amazing asset with which to build upon. And so I think that's something that we definitely can bring from our backgrounds into the Jewish community is asset-based community development principles. Start with your strengths because we all have strengths. Each community has strengths with which to build on, to do the work and address the challenges and opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for speaking to that. I really appreciate that. And yeah, that's really interesting.
Thanks, Jeff, for the question. Who else has a question for Stacey Aviva?
See me moving. I'm just going to make sure that I get my cable plugged to make sure I don't lose power.
Teen?
Not sure if this is the forum, but it's a question that has been worrying me for a while now. And that is like this, we've kind of heard a call at some point to say, well, what is this whole DEI worth any longer if we weren't included in the beginning? And I think we did a lot of DEI work within the Jewish nonprofit world, kind of like inward thinking as to how we react and how we become more DEI tolerant, more DEI aware. Now we see that, you know, we're the ones personally being persecuted right now. And so there's this call from the social justice world to say, well, you know, we need a timely public conversation about the importance of this equity work because so many people are kind of crying, well, this is not what, you know, it's not worth anything. So I was wondering if JFNA have been thinking around about this, or you as, you know, as an individual, and with the people that you work. And Seth, maybe you've been thinking about it as well, kind of where we're at, what we should be thinking, how we should be answering the people who say, well, why is, what's the need of our work even worth in this time, at this particular moment in time? And how do we incorporate Jewish and, and other racism within this sphere?
Thank you so much. That is a very important question. And I will take you to a conversation that our CEO had with Ricky Torres he's a congressman from the Bronx in New York. And basically there is a lot of bad DEI. There just is. But there is also the principles behind it are important. And Ricky Torres said this. There are two forms of DEI. There's a radical form of DEI, which is essentially a vessel for anti-Americanism, anti-Zionism, anti-capitalist. And then there's a moderate form of DEI, which seeks to promote greater opportunity and representation of people of color or other marginalized identities in our society. And what he says is, I support the moderate one. And he's a critic of the radical one. But when we attack DEI in the abstract, he says that we're blurring the line between the two. And that in that fight against anti-Semitism, you will see that in the right wings, there is an ideological assault on racial diversity and just some unseemly other isms that come out. And so what is important is that as the Jewish community, we have every right to combat the narrative that Jews are oppressors or Jews are colonizers or only white or delegitimizing. We have every right to push back against that narrative. But also, too, one of the most powerful things that we have been able to do in the Jewish community is be able to be that sometimes small, because we're small people, quiet voice that says humanity's shared dignity is at stake. And we must be able to stand up and say, not on our watch. The same thing happened with civil rights. Not all of the Jewish community was saying, civil rights is the greatest thing. Our Southern Jewish brothers and sisters were like, well, you know what? Segregation is, this is the way things are. We got to roll with it. Maybe you're trying to move too fast. Calm down. Where I know it was mostly our Northern Jewish brothers and sisters who were like gung ho. Hey, so it's the same thing as today. And I'll say one last thing. But for civil rights, we could not be fighting some of the anti-Semitism that's going on today. Title IX and the Civil Rights Amendment, we're using that to fight anti-Semitism. I believe the same thing with DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Those principles, if we get in there and make sure that there's ethical principles, make sure that there is a professionalized field that really is committed to shared humanity and culturing and nurturing learning of others and respect of others and not weaponizing people's traumas against one another, we can infuse Jewish principles into the ethical use of a moderate DEI that will also help us to combat racism and anti-Semitism, because to me, they work hand in hand and we're stronger together. And Jews of color are critical bridge builders in this conversation. And it's time that we invest in Jews of color to be having this conversation and to be building those bridges and helping each of our communities to understand anti-Semitism and racism and how we can be working on those in tandem. So the question is, it's a great question, and there's some tension there. But we are the people who love tension. We grow in the tension. We flourish in Mitzrayim. In Egypt, we flourish.
Yep, we continue to learn.
Yes.
Thank you.
Mark, yeah.
Yes. Well, first of all, Stacey Aviva, thanks for that. That was a very helpful answer to a response to an issue that I've found a challenging one to discuss, even within sort of my own family and friend group. So really appreciate that. I'm Mark Zitter from the Bay Area. I've been involved with the Federation on the board governance level and currently launching a nonprofit that is trying to become the Rhodes Scholarship of Social Sector Leadership Development Programs. And in the past, I've ran private companies as well as chaired other boards. And I'm really interested in what you've talked about in terms of values, which I think are, as you say, extremely important, but I find usually understated, underemphasized, and sometimes just not discussed very much. So these values are very important. We all have them on the walls of our offices and so forth. And yet, I don't feel they're usually very well utilized, described. I don't feel like when we recruit board members, we talk about values very much. So I'm curious as to where you've seen, or some of the best practices you've seen for truly incorporating values explicitly and in a way that really matters, rather than just having them be talking points.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I think that what you just said and what you just raised is the critical thing, is that we have to be able to raise that as leaders and as board members, especially on those executive committees, or if we're hearing it from thank you for the Blue podcast. If we're hearing it from our professional staff, that we have to bring that question to the executive committee and saying, here, this is what we're noticing. What can we do? And then bringing in key staff, key advisors, key strategists to help us deal with that, because we know that statements and slogans don't work. It's in our policies and procedures that we are going to reveal our culture. And so to create a culture, it has to have those policies and procedures that are born out of those values. That's why I think it's important to do a mapping, a culture mapping, a values mapping. What are your values? Map out your values, and then ask, how do our policies and procedures address value A, B, C, and D? And then if there isn't, a value that you can and then how can you measure it? I haven't mentioned evaluation. Evaluation is one of the things that I'm also responsible for. How are we measuring this? Is there a measurement that can that we can see, that we can measure quantitatively and qualitatively? And one of our measurement criteria that we use are the 4 R's. Recruitment. You got to have those basic numbers. Are you getting people in the door to participate on boards? And, if you're having trouble with that, it might be the second R, which is relevance. Is your value and what you're saying relevant to people? Can they connect with it? Can they use it? Can they make sense of it? That's the second R. So recruitment, relevance, and then relationships. Are people having those kind of relationships? Do people come into boards and how are they onboarded? Are they being introduced to the key staff, the key board members, even key alumni? So they understand and have those relationships that and mentors. Are they getting a mentor that is going to guide them through? I really appreciate this with the board that I just joined with I have a mentor that I can call, that's introduced me, that I can call upon, ask questions, checks in on me. So making sure people have those relationships, build those relationships. And then the final one is retention. Are you retaining people year 1, year 2, year 3, 5, 10 years? Do you have a plan of retention that goes out at least 10 years? And then even in the offboarding, when someone is an alumni to your organization, whether it's a professional or a board member, their offboarding is so important because you can really retain them as ambassadors, whether they're currently serving a official role, how they are still being retained is very important. So that's the 4 R's, and I'll put that.
And I think that the 5th R, Stacey Aviva, and that's replacing yourself.
Yeah.
It's one thing to retain for a long time, but after a while, you actually also have to step off and replace.
Great.
With the same
Stacey,
value.
will you put those in the chat? Those 4. I got 3. I think I missed the 4th. So yeah, recruit, relevance, relationships, and retention. Thank you. Yeah, beautiful. And Mark, thanks for that question.
Yeah.
Lisa, do you want to? Thanks for your question in the chat. Do you want to share that out loud?
Yeah, I know several younger Jews of color and who are actually involved with creating their Jews of color groups. They are doing consulting. I'm a career counselor by training, and so I ask everybody what you do for a living, and I sometimes get more than I need to know. And they're all off, they're traveling all over the world doing their thing. And I would love them to come back to LA and do some of it with us. And even the people I know in LA, I've been connected with throughout the last 5 years, maybe, but it's like they're always busy and they're always going after a cause. They like they speed past me so fast I don't have time to really connect with them. Is there a bigger Jewish organization that is bringing the different Jews of colors together?
What do you mean by different?
That there are many different groups that are consulting and doing the work of DEI related to the Jewish community.
Right.
And they're not just, they're working with Hillel, they're working with NCJW, they're working with all these national groups, and then they go, and I mean, I haven't really done in-depth talks of all their consulting, but I would like to know if they are if there's a national group or even strong regional groups. Rather than getting connected one person at a time.
Great. That is a great question. That has been in the works since 2020, and even more so now. There's going to be, we're looking at a conference in 2025. We're also, thank you. We also have a leadership Jewish Leadership Certificate Program that he just put the link in there, where we are trying to bring different federations together and helping us create our strategies together and talking to one another. And I've developed that program. We were just about to take a group of Jews of color from different organizations on an Israel mission in 2 weeks. And we postponed that for several reasons. And I see a lot of funders in the room. We have postponed it. And so we would love to have funding because we want to get more Jews of color on this mission, and making sure that they're from Asian and Mizrahi, Sephardi, Black, Jews of color. And we were going to spend some significant time doing that strategy work there in Israel, and then bringing that back. And so I was just seeing emails flying back and forth. We just postponed it yesterday. So I was just seeing emails going back and forth because we're going to be having it within it will be this year. But we are really, really working hard on that. And actually, as soon as I jump off the call with you, I'm going into a meeting where we are several of us are kind of are working on some principles and values for some shared work together. And all of that requires funding. So
Are there some key leaders, if I wanted to know who the stronger Jews of color organizations might be? Where would I look? Just online? I know Gina is at it, Gena,
Gina Green.
J-A.
Yeah. Why don't you, I'm going to put my email here because I think they're all good depending on what you want.
I want role models.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You're talking to one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. But everybody's so individual and also spread out, and it's hard to get hold of the power people.
Yeah. And so I put my email there, and I'd be willing to have a conversation with you because there are some key ones. And I'll just say our team is excellent, and we don't just work in federations. We are being tapped by the philanthropic world, the academia, and others. As far as I know, myself and my two colleagues are the highest ranking Jews of color in Jewish spaces right now. And and we do that training and that development and that bringing of people together because we don't want to work in silos.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
that question, Lisa. And I'll just, Stacey, if it's okay to lift up a few others that I know of in terms of organizations, groups of Jews of color who are doing great work. One is the Jews of Color Initiative, JOCI. That's led by Ilana Kaufman out of the Bay Area.
Yeah, I know her.
There's Jutina Eco, and this is a group of Latin Jews. And it's led by Ana Lucia Lopez Revoredo. Actually, she's going to be on our
Jutina,
next
yeah.
Monday, which will be great. And then I know these folks less, but the Lunar Collective is a group of Asian Jews, organization by and for Asian American Jews. And they do great work from what I hear as well. So we have 3 minutes. Is there one final question for Stacey Aviva before we close? I might ask one final question. Stacey Aviva, what thank you for those. A dote to you, Jubian Princess. Yeah, I mean, why don't you close, Stacey Aviva, if you want to share a little bit more about those orgs you just put down, or and what support do boards need right now? What we all again on this call are on boards, run boards, fund boards, support boards in various ways. What support do boards need right now?
I think the what boards need they need juicy work to do to really be involved in the strategy. A lot of times we kind of get into the people informing us of things, and that's great. But how can we actually use our expertise to help craft, adjust, and inform the strategy is really important. I think as well too is engagement. We need to see one another. People are, we've said this for years now, people are zoomed out. And so being able to have those in-person gatherings where we can really see one another face to face and talk are invaluable. And really we also need peer support and processing spaces because this world is can be a place that can be emotionally and psychologically dangerous. And so creating those spaces where we can breathe, where we can share our frustrations, where we can share those stories that that we're holding inside of us is also important to humanize each other and one another.
Amen. Thank you, Stacey Aviva, and thank you all for being here. Just a reminder, so next Friday, we will have another board talk with Ana Lucia Lopez Revoredo from Jutina Eco and Gamal Palmer from Conscious Builders, two additionally incredible Jewish leaders. And my last just 2 cents, I encourage all of us to show up and to slow down. I encourage us all to reach out to our CEOs and our board members to check in with them. Encourage us to keep building community and building relationships. We all know impact moves at the speed of trust. So, be safe and sound, and Shabbat Shalom, and have a restful week.
Thank you so much, Stacey Aviva.
Thank you
Thanks
very
so
much.
much, Seth, for offering.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
See you next
Thank
time.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom,
Shabbat
everyone.
Shalom.